Art history often confines itself to layers, as do most areas of knowledge. Cinema, for example, could segment its greatness into several tiers, the surface layer being those films that have the grand mass appeal. Everyone knows within the collective consciousness that they are in fact great films. They've been vicariously experienced by the culture. Then, as you move down, you begin to get into the less appreciated, lesser known works of art. Perhaps films that do not possess the widespread appeal, or are too opaque to be able to comprehend in a fulfilling manner. Compared to those great pieces that also carry more of the entertainment factor. These are films that are denoted to those that would perhaps consider themselves the true fans of cinema, those with a knowledge that goes beyond what the zeitgeist served them and belong to a more curated, more sophisticated clique. However, if we go further, we can discover a layer of films that for one reason or another have been completely forgotten by both groups. Failures in distribution, or just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. There are a variety of truly great films that are barely even mentioned within cinematic discourse, and yet the only thing that distinguishes them from the other categories is popularity. These are just such films, those that perhaps lost the luck of the draw and have simply been excluded from cinema's grand conversation. I didn't want to select films that are obscure for the sake of obscurity. These are films that would have at one time belonged to some manner of cinematic canon, and the deluge of modern information has simply wiped them away. These are just a few of the countless gems that are being lost to time, and I hope that this video not only raises awareness for these films, but the fact that true celebration of cinema and all art requires study and interest beyond the established circles. Such is the nature of these films that they are very difficult to find, and as such the quality of some of their presentations are unalterable. But the important thing for now is that these films are seen. We begin our journey through one of the many neglected branches of cinema in the Czech New Wave, with Juraj Jakubisko's Birds, Orphans and Fools. A transgressive odyssey through the world of those who seek to break beyond the boundaries set by an invisible elite through a visually arresting glimpse in the tumultuous reality of subservience. Birds, Orphans and Fools is a film that owes its allegiance to many influences. In one part, it's a Fellini-esque circus of characters, straddling the line between tender realism and carnivalesque chaos. Characters are draped in a plethora of colours and fabrics as they embark in decadent behaviour amidst the backdrop of a collapsing world. In another breath, it can be categorised as a Pasolini-style allegory for characters that live lives impacted by an invisible oppressor, leading to a degeneracy of all manners of the human condition. And simultaneously, it slots perfectly as a staple of the Czech New Wave, employing a signature dark and twisted take, opposing the more realist films of the time. It's at home right alongside films such as Black Peter, Daisies, and The Cremator. And though it owes much to the films that came before it, it remains a remarkably original piece. The film opens with a statement from director Jakubisko in the voice of a child.
Ja, Juraj Jakubisko, slovenský režisér, budem vám rozprávať o ľuďoch, ktorí chceli byť blázniví,
ako je potrebné, a zároveň márne hľadať cestu k záchrane pred životom, ktorý nepozná lásku k nenávisti, bláznivosť bez skutočného šialenstva, a zároveň márne hľadať cestu k záchrane pred životom, ktorý nepozná lásku k nenávisti, bláznivosť bez skutočného šialenstva, šťastie bez smútku a smrť bez všednosti.
The film follows three main characters, all of whom have been orphaned during a war. They take refuge in a surrealist bombed-out church and employ a life philosophy that, in opposition to the hellscape that surrounds them, the characters choose to recapture their freedom via regressing to their base instincts and adopting the reckless abandon of children. The characters revel in their primal nature, and what this results in is a surrealist landscape in which all manner of symbols are seamlessly woven between one another in opposition to the world around them. Our protagonist's modus operandi is spiritual anarchism. The film is about a search for meaning and the absurdity that emerges within societies where all hope is left. The characters lead a life of limitless hedonism. Anything that can be, will be. Camera equipment is regularly visible, and the filmmaker, already making himself a presence from the opening words, assures that the viewer is constantly aware of his presence through the constant techniques that eschew continuity. The film is evocative of a similar kind of 1960s idealism in which, to turn away from the cruel systems of the modern world, our characters find a deep love within everything, rather than a violence, and its nonsensical nature is so obvious that it essentially carries the seriousness of a cartoon. But beneath the humour and frivolity lies a much deeper story of those at the mercy of their circumstance. A very similar approach can be seen in Lars von Trier's The Idiots, wherein characters rebel as an attempt to remove oneself from society, and yet they have the freedom of doing so, whereas here, the characters feign their acts of freedom, for they lack any freedom whatsoever. Though their world pretends to be one of colour and splendour, the world around them is evil, cruel, and empty. The three main characters are victims of this world, lost in a kaleidoscope without ever questioning the foundation that their lives are built upon. They are as utterly lost as the children that litter their refuge. No one seeks to question the welfare of the children, just as no one questions their own. The characters revel in anything around them, including their own downfalls. It's not that they've regained any sense of freedom, they're simply rejecting anything that the world throws at them, resulting in moments of comedy that are in reality deeply tragic. The characters simply wear masks to shield themselves from life's harsh realities. Once they become so obsessed with their own debasement, they're no longer a concern to the real world, remaining trapped in a world of fantasy, succumbing to the allure of immediate pleasure in a world that has been deprived of it completely. This is the world of the powerless, believing that in the harbouring of their own chaos, they can regain some humanity. Jakubisko reaffirms this through his directing and editing style, the endless POVs shattering the objective lens of the camera, all the while the intrusive insertions of images and harsh cuts of the montage. The characters are swallowed by the camera lens, unable to escape it, paradoxically having it break any kind of established cinematic rules there are. The characters are perpetually in a world without rules, because what's the point of rules if you have no agency to enact them? Jakubisko employs a constantly moving handheld camera, often shooting with an incredibly wide lens. All movement is exacerbated and warps the image beyond the frame to display the sheer scope of the chaos on show. It reaches far into the horizon of this decrepit world, juxtaposed with the fanciful revelry of a circus, and this energy never stops. Jakubisko forms a story here, wherein people must obtain the status of a fool in order to survive, to laugh at the hellishness around you, to see the world's follies as a comedy. There is a power in maintaining the spirit amidst no hope, but we can never forget that this life of chaos may be the exact plan of the oppressor.
Nešťastný. Nešťastný. Šťastný. Sme šťastní.
In many ways, the antithesis to Birds, Orphans and Fools is Cynthia Scott's sentimental meditation on the later years of one's life in the company of strangers. 7 elderly women and their tour guide find themselves momentarily trapped in the Canadian countryside and await their rescue. Aside from that, there is no great drama of the film, as instead we simply meander to and fro between the characters in a part fiction, part non-fiction mood piece on the perspectives of morality amidst the sanctity of the great outdoors.
There it is. I can't hear. I can't hear it. Is it still singing? Did it sing again? Once? It doesn't sing very much, you know. It sings its song and it's not like
singing. It is
you hear
singing,
it?
yes.
The method of storytelling here is something that we would later see in Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. Characters retain their real names, the script has an outline but is primarily improvised, and the backdrop of nature's tranquility allows space for our characters to explore their deepest vulnerabilities in this quiet serenity. The Company of Strangers is a humanist tale. It cares for its characters, giving each of the women time to expound on an aspect of life that's deep and meaningful to them, about relationships, about the lives they've had. The grand questions, yet explored with a tenderness. The things that resonate are the details, and the love is expounded for these people as the rest of the characters ask more of them. What they have to say is important.
Do you hear the frogs they're singing? They sound nice. Are you afraid of frogs? No, I like them. Oh, yeah. I guess because when I was young, when I was a little girl, I used to go frog hunting.
We learn about every one of these characters and are given a sense of just how much life brims within them, even though the rest of the world is beginning to see them as dead. Much like an Ozu film, we're constantly reminded that life is fleeting. In the grandiosity of these Canadian forests, we focus on the vast simplicity of it all. We gaze at the majestic external world so that we can quietly reflect on the bubbling internal. There's a great and unknown space surrounding us. In one part, an unanswerable entity that we will never fully comprehend. In others, a simple answer that we've always known. Just like the lives of these women.
I feel very happy here, don't you?
In a way.
If our problems are solved, we still have problems.
True. Mm-hmm.
Well, it makes me feel happy, even if it's only for a very short while.
There's connectivity between them all, and at the same time, they're just like every other human being, content in their simplicity. The film ultimately is a collection of moments, though the moments are incredibly joyous. The women stumble upon a small artifact and try to figure out what it is. The sincerity of the women opening up to one another, and how they're received with such keen interest. It's a story of finding great camaraderie, even when overwhelmed with the almost unbearable weight of one's own impermanence.
Never a man, never a man.
Oh, why not?
Oh, you know, Sissy, I'm a lesbian. I don't really like to... Men don't interest me all that much. I've had my little experiments, but it didn't work.
Didn't work?
No.
Oh, dear.
No. I get along better with women.
Women. Oh, that's good.
There is a great bittersweet nature of life. We feel pure joy in all of these women embarking on what appears to be new adventures, and yet with them comes all the baggage and intrigue that every human being carries on their journeys. It's a film about the love of life, about acceptance, about finding joy in the small things, because that is all we have, the small things. Cynthia Scott reminds us with films such as this, that the fact that we can even make films about old women where nothing really happens and just spend time with them is a testament to the humanism that remains the definitive factor within all great art. This story of elderly women simply being remains a deeply human and beautiful story about the importance of any life to be something worth living.
It's true.
When you say
I love you,
that's disgusting.
it's a sin to tell a lie.
Oh, yeah,
ready water someday when you yell like that. Yes, I know. Rock up!
And then, as we move to South American filmmaker Raul Ruiz and his intentionally opaque adoption of the common filmmaking genre in The Hypothesis of the Stolen Painting. Starting its life as an art documentary for French television, Hypothesis was to explore the writings of artist Pierre Klazowski. In the end, the work definitely was about Klazowski's work, but presented in a meta-narrative, where his writings were exploring the very images and ideas that were being presented on screen.
Les tableaux ne montrent pas, ils font allusion. Les tableaux, mis en scène par le moyen technique des tableaux vivants, ne font pas allusion. Ils montrent.
This is what they received instead of that documentary. A self-aware contemplation on the idea of the art documentary, attempting to deconstruct the very act of discovering meaning within art. The film follows an art collector, guiding us through a large manor and a series of 7 paintings by a fictional artist. However, the 4th painting is missing and assumed stolen. In order to find out what this painting was, the art collector reenacts the remaining 6 paintings in the physical space, finding the connections between all of them. Through the use of tableaux vivants, the film attempts to decode the hidden meaning located through the art pieces in the physical realm. Hypothesis shows that within ancient works of art, that which was once common knowledge has become esoteric or even lost to us, as much of what connects these pieces are symbols that are hidden from the naked eye. Symbols that were in the space of the frame, yet we literally cannot see them.
Le masque. Voici l'élément de liaison avec le tableau suivant.
Et alors nous demandons, quel est ce tableau et pourquoi le masque nous y amène-t-il?
The film becomes a labyrinth. As more information is discovered, rather than giving coherence to the greater whole, we're left with even more questions and even more avenues of possibility. The film is shot by cinematographer Sasha Vierney, whose similarities in Last Year at Marienbad, as well as the work of Peter Greenaway, are immediate. The ethereal motion through ostentatious spaces, all the while emphasising the artifice of everything, evoke a sense that we are beyond the constraints of both time and space.
L'arrivée du croisé. Je pense qu'à personne ne serait échappé le côté insoutenable de l'anecdote. D'où vient ce croisé? Que surprend-il?
And thematically, we can see parallels with something like Russian Ark. It's about art, philosophy, lost history. Only this time, we have the added mystery of a stolen painting. Or do we? Throughout Hypothesis, a disembodied narrator also speaks to us, yet he contradicts what the art collector says. He suggests that the painting was not stolen. In fact, it may have never existed at all. Someone's perception here is objectively incorrect, and as such the film proposes a mystery that we know we will never solve. We contemplate the quest for meaning in this opaque world too fluid for reason to be found. A world awash with ambiguity as ancient myth and the postmodern perspective collide.
Alors, oublions. Laissons les tableaux s'effacer, s'évanouir, afin qu'il ne reste plus que les gestes seuls, isolés, les gestes de la cérémonie.
And such is the uncertain ground that all art now appears to be built on. More knowledge with fewer answers. Hypothesis takes the form of a mockumentary about the very nature of art criticism. The idea that an analysis of an ancient painting, so alien to our modern sensibilities that we have to completely redshift our perceptions to even begin understanding its perspective, that our logic almost breaks down altogether. Then we expound on that further, on the idea of an unfinished art piece, the endless possibilities that can emerge within this, and how futile it can seem to something that we have no idea how much we do not know. And then reminding us that even with all our information, ultimately everything is already pure speculation. And then there is the idea of the stolen painting. What would that mean for that piece of art? We would inevitably analyse the act of stealing in itself and begin to interpret meaning onto said act and how it relates to that specific art. Hypothesis is an exploration on the subjectivity of perception and the endless rabbit hole of meanings and symbols we find ourselves in, looking for a definitive answer even when we can't see the whole truth. No matter how we look at art, we find ourselves in deeper and deeper abstractions, and in the end, it's all just a hypothesis.
Comme l'aspect répréhensible de cet acte réside dans l'intention, la manifestation de ces moments n'est-elle pas bien pire? Ne nous ouvre-t-elle pas un nombre illimité de possibilités d'interprétation?
In our second film regarding a stolen item, Kazuhiko Hasegawa's paranoid social commentary, The Man Who Stole the Sun, deals with the ramifications of power and responsibility within an alienated society. The film follows Makoto Kido, an eccentric high school chemistry teacher who finds himself a legitimate outcast. Within his own area of expertise, he's vastly misunderstood, and within the realms of societal norms, too unconventional to be accepted. Life here appears fleeting because a void has emerged in our post-war society, wherein basic human interaction has had to be completely reconstructed. In turn, Makoto does the only thing he knows he's able to do, and decides to build 2 atomic bombs. Single-handedly shifting the nation's equilibrium, he holds the country at ransom, and yet with this newfound power, doesn't know what to do with it. The film is one of both intense seriousness and utter absurdity. Makoto is a character almost unaware of the depth of his situation, constantly detached from reality. Every action he takes and every circumstance he finds himself a part of has immense consequences, all of which Makoto never fully comprehends the severity of. In one of the film's opening sequences, Makoto finds himself at the centre of a hostage situation, and by the end, is celebrated as a common hero, although he didn't actually do anything. The film establishes the ludicrous standard that people are not in control of any situation that they find themselves in. Makoto does nothing to shift his perception within society from an outcast to a paragon. The making of the bomb and its resulting inaction is a byproduct of urban stagnation. Rebellion may be a part of it, but it's primarily because there's nothing else Makoto can do with his life. He and everyone else are a victim of circumstance, only impacted upon by others who either attempt to break the paradigm or are bent on conserving society as it is, because people like Makoto are unknowingly those with the capacity to break all social structures. Makoto navigating a meaningless society is most evident in the crafting of the bomb. It's never thought of what will occur after, even though Makoto does at some degree recognise the risk of the situation. This sequence takes an agonisingly long time and is filmed with incredible accuracy. The depiction was so accurate, in fact, that the process of building the bomb caused legitimate concerns with the Japanese government. Ultimately, Makoto ends up using this power to prolong baseball games without any commercials. He later aims to get the Rolling Stones to play in Japan. Even with all of the power at his disposal, his idea of change is still tied to the very system that continues to isolate people. Even with such drastic consequences, the system persists. What Makoto represents is a microcosm of one segment of society at large, one that has become stagnant with only two extreme binaries as any kind of option left. The public is brought to a fervour, and the cat and mouse games occur between Makoto and the police. And the whims of the Japanese people are essentially being guided by a man with no plan. Meanwhile, Inspector Yamashita is the one man responsible for being able to stop him, although perhaps society doesn't want him to be stopped. A metaphor between the restrictive traditionalism of Japanese society and the uncertain freedoms of its capitalistic future. The people want something different and are willing to accept the leadership of a madman. The film employs much of the chaotic surrealism that was indicative of Japanese cinema of the 1970s, unafraid to blur absurd topics with legitimate social unease. The result is a film that is in equal parts a deep social satire as well as a slapstick comedy. We can see many films emerging from Japan that continue a similar approach, such as the work of Sion Sono. Often absurdity is the best way to capture the contradicting layers that exist within our modern society. And even with its entertainment factor, blending comedy and thriller, The Man Who Stole the Sun goes beyond an enjoyable film and asks the questions about how an individual reflects society's metaphoric quest for both power and purpose. So often the human experience finds itself to be completely extinguished, and yet in some strange ways, there will always be those that reach for the sun. Kisapmata by Mike De Leon follows the Karandang family and the unravelling of their lives under the monstrous tyranny of their father. Set in the Philippines in the 1980s, Kisapmata is a film without any sensationalism. Its primary goal is to tell the story of a real-life monster.
Ay pagbagak! Mabati ka! Anay!
Padasinak na lukin manin. Padasem!
A father that devours his family, whose warped conservative idealism reflects the harsh realities of the Philippine people who up to the release of this film had lived under martial law for many years. Director Mike De Leon cites Hitchcock as the greatest influence on this film, and it is that undercurrent of suspense that never leaves us.
Mandadong! Mandadong! Maupo ka.
At any moment, we know that there must be a great release of all this tension. However, the difference here is that the horror of Kisapmata does not carry the cinematic splendour of Hitchcock's horror. Here, the horror is all too real. The story follows the gradually tightening grip that Father Tatang holds over his family. His daughter announces that she's to be married and is expecting a child, to which the father ingratiates her husband-to-be into the family with ulterior motives, refusing to let go of his daughter and building a structure around his life where he is the patriarch in total control.
Nasaan ang ama mo?
Sino ho?
Si Raul!
Ay, wala ko siya rito.
Okay na lang! Alam kong ganyan siya! Palabasin mo rin! Palabasin mo! Noel! Noel! Okay na lang!
Upon release, the film was deeply controversial for its subject matter, and all of this comes from the performance of Vixelayan as Tatang, a deranged, abusive man whose manipulation and rage permeate every moment he's on screen. Kisapmata became a staple of Philippine cinema, not simply for its rich portrayal of evil, but the depth at which a human being can inflict pain on their loved ones. Tatang as a character shifts between equal parts clarity and derangement, in one moment possessing utter disregard for his family, to then justifying his actions through the guise of a caring father. There's no certainty as to what is his truth, other than what grants him in the present moment the most control over any situation. He goes beyond the threshold of violent behaviour, as we see what it's like to live under the tutelage of a psychopath.
Saan ka nga sublin?
The character of Tatang is built on the violent possession he claims over his family, and the most horrifying element of the film is that it's a true story. The film was based on a famous report in the Philippines, of which Mike de Leon referenced greatly during filming, only having to censor the work due to how close to reality it was. Tatang is unable to quell this rage that dwells within him, sucking all the space out of the film. Each scene becomes so suffocating as we're trapped in these closed spaces around him, the camera framing such scenes so that our points of convergence are often cornered. We've seen films such as Nil by Mouth that show a patriarchal figure's dominance over his family and how that dominance is fueled by his manipulation and paranoia. And in Kisapmata, this reaches the most catastrophic of levels. There's no explanation as to why things are the way they are in this household, if it's even worth finding a reason. Kisapmata translates to in the blink of an eye, and every instance of cruelty and violence, we watch them and learn about the most devastating effects of tyranny, and how the human spirit can be extinguished in the blink of an eye.
Alam kong hindi nila ako maunawaan, pero kung mailalagay lang nila ang kanilang sarili sa aking posisyon,
a landmark in the often ignored well of masterpieces that is Hungarian cinema, Twilight by Gyorgy Feher continues the nation's signature style of bleak and terrifying landscapes, populated by figures of an almost profane quality.
A varázsló adta ezeket neked. Megtiltotta, hogy mesélj magatokról.
The story is what you expect from a people with such a profound understanding of the human shadow. We begin with the rape and murder of a young girl. The perpetrator remains unknown and is still on the loose. In the hunt for this serial killer, we're introduced to an ex-detective who becomes dragged into a bottomless pit of obsession as he spirals further down into a world of despair. And upon realizing the depth of the world's darkness and his insatiable need to quench the world of such, he uses a young girl as bait in an attempt to catch the criminal. The world of Twilight is a nightmare filmed in monochrome. It burns slowly, its atmosphere is all-consuming, and its evil is ceaseless.
Maga sose fogja megtalálni. Mert ebből a fajtából, amelyik csak véletlenségből nem gyilkol. Túl sok van.
Fog lingers in the air. We move glacially through landscapes that appear to be forever locked in the Dark Ages, and the stench of death lingers in the dying walls of the dead villages. This is the world that we must traverse in order to extinguish its evil, and yet the further we move through it, we realise that we're no closer to destroying evil. Rather, we've discovered that evil is an ocean and we've only been floating along its surface. We dive deeper and learn of an omniscient evil that taints everyone that comes into contact with it. The world is a black, toxic swamp, and all are swallowed by its malevolence. How can something so unimaginably cruel as the murder of an innocent girl end up feeling so insignificant? Even if we eradicate that evil, who can save this world after so much of it has been lost? We're desperately trying in Twilight to reach for justice or to find a way to recapture the purity of the human soul. But here, the soul has been tainted. The world has been shattered by this avenue of evil that has opened up to it, and it can never be undone. The innocence of the world has merged with this alien blackness and has been forever contaminated by it. Feher rejects most traditional styles of filmmaking for something which by many could be perceived as the basis of a rather traditional yet sinister thriller. We see many parallels with something like Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder, wherein a detective encounters many suspects that may as well be the person that committed the acts. Here we have the same. We discover many suspects that dwell in the pit of humanity's stomach, yet at the same time, we know it's not them.
Más valamit evett még? Hol lett azt a csokoládét? Most kaptam az értesítést a törvényszéki orvostani intézetből, a gyereket fölboncolták, csokoládét találtak a gyomrában.
And these people get to roam free around the world, contaminating it even further. The mystery in Twilight is something Feher asks a lot of the viewer. We're desperate for questions to be answered, yet every time we inch closer, Feher drags us away, instead of progressing the plot, giving us an empty landscape which stretches beyond the horizon, an empty vista wherein there is nothing to be found. We're surrounded by such hopelessness in our search for vindication to this evil. This is a story of the human condition when it's been poisoned, as our main protagonist is too dragged into some kind of malevolent fervour, in the mere attempt to be able to halt the darkness surrounding us. The film is meticulously shot. It moves at its own pace and keeps us trapped in the dirt. Meanwhile, children around us are being murdered and there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is listen to the music playing and watch the fog devour this land whole, a land isolated from space and time. Beginning his career as a playwright, Bahram Beyzai concocted what many considered to be his masterpiece. It wasn't until 1982 that he turned this vision into a cinematic piece with the eponymous title, Death of Yazdgerd. The story is based around the real-life assassination of Persian King Yazdgerd III, who was assassinated under strange circumstances. And this is where the film begins. We open announcing the king's death at the hands of a humble miller in the outskirts of a city. We find the miller and his family with a bloodied corpse, garbed in the king's regal attire. The kingsmen have arrived, and it's here, inside the small mill, that we stay for the remainder of the film, as each person gives an account of what happened to the now deceased king, if that is what he really is.
ای تو ابلهی ای تو ساده دل سالیان سال در این بیابان آسیا چرخانده‌ای با نان جوین و با خرمای خشک آیا در تو نیروی کین ستانی نیست
The most immediate and obvious comparison that Death of Yazdgerd has is with Kurosawa's Rashomon. A crime takes place to which there are several witnesses, and we hear each of their changing perspectives. Although in Yazdgerd, we do not move away from this location. We do not cut away to see each witness's POV, we're merely told it. It's a very true adaptation of a play to the screen, and the delivery of such, one has to say, is theatrical. From the melodrama in acting, to the verbose manner in which the film is delivered, this truly is a play in the mode of a film.
جنگی خدای تیز سنان آن بهرام پشتیبان آن دل دهنده به من آن جگردار آن که دیدارش زهره بر دشمن می ترکاند بر باره که هر می رفت و با گردش درفش راه را نشانم می داد تا آن باد تیره پیدا شد.
Discussing filmmaking here is a toned-down process, far more simplified than many of the other films we've mentioned today. Lighting is simple and low to fuel its brooding mystery. The camera is uncomplicated, though highly calculated, composing simple frames in their most theatrical manner. This is to heighten the most important aspect of the film, which is its unfolding screenplay, whose purpose is to gradually lay questions and ideas on top of one another slowly, enriching this scenario beyond a murder mystery, but a rich tapestry of culture, identity, and the symbols we live our lives by. As the witnesses each give their testimonies, a ticking clock occurs within the film. The family each take turns to explain what really happened the night that the king showed up, and they each play various roles to explain. Meanwhile, outside of the mill, gallows are being constructed to hang the miller. And though the verdict of guilty has already been cast, we know that there remain more and more questions unanswered. And it's here that the metaphorical clock appears within the film's thematics. While this makeshift court plays itself out, the troops that the king had been fleeing from are getting closer and closer, leading the king's men to the realization that they're reaching the final moments of the pre-Islamic world.
و ای دختر من نزدیکتر بیایید ای قربانیان تنگ دستی من اینک من از همزادم جدا می شوم از بینوایی از آنچه شنیدم دشمنانی که می آیند تازیان به من ماننده ترند تا به این سرداران و من اگر نان و خرما داشتم به ایشان میدادم.
When Beyzai created this work, it was amidst the backdrop of the Iranian Revolution, and this work of the past was an attempt to comment on the present and impending future. As the transformation of a once mighty empire morphs into a new religious order, Death of Yazdgerd becomes a mirror for the ideological shifts occurring in Iran at the time. All of the characters grapple with the meaning of their culture and how it's been built upon symbols and perceptions, divine titles bestowed upon mortal beings. Yet without them, we lose all sense of connection with our very identity. And the twists within the narrative not only make for a captivating screenplay, it's within these points that Death of Yazdgerd shows the struggle of navigating the shifting sands of history and how those waves of time are still impacting us to this day.
آرینک داوران اصلی از راه میرسند شما را که درفش سپید بود این بود داوری تا رای درفش سیاه آنان چه باشد.
Thank you for listening. I hope that you seek out these films, but I hope even more that the great works of art of all our cultures are not forgotten.